Hi guys, so hypocrite and self-described Brexit Hardman Steve Baker decided to attack Labour and the SNP for what he described as voting for any old authoritarianism these days. And he's a hypocrite, and I'll get to that in a moment. But think about it for a moment, how Labour and the SNP are not in government. Labour and the SNP do not have a majority. But Steve Baker believes it's necessary to attack them and not Boris Johnson or the Conservative Party or the government itself, who are actually responsible for the Coronavirus Act. He's attacking someone who doesn't really have any power, but is actually supporting the government. And he's not attacking the people who are actually presenting this act. But let's hear what he had to say.
You say that you're expecting to vote against when this comes before the House of Commons next week. How big a rebellion do you think we could see?
It's very difficult to say until we've seen the exact detail of what the government's tabling and how the votes will come. But let's be absolutely clear, because it seems that Labour and the SNP will vote for any old authoritarianism these days. It looks like the government will, of course, get their business with an enormous majority. But
so they'll vote for any old authoritarianism these days. Well, actually, let's look at real authoritarianism, because at least the Coronavirus Act has, will expire. The Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill was voted for, given its full support, by Steve Baker. This bill that will restrict people's rights in the long term to protest, for example, even a one-person protest is restricted. And it allows the Home Secretary to rewrite the legislation at her whim. Now, who actually voted against it? Well, you can actually see here. So the people who voted against more stronger authoritarianism was Labour in red and the SNP in yellow. So Steve Baker is a hypocrite. I've already, talked about how he is a hypocrite. But let's hear what else he had to say about this.
I do think it's important that some of us do seek to hold the government to account with these extraordinary powers.
So what Steve Baker is trying to do here is to convince the public that he's standing up to the party. Now, in reality, he's not. It is quite a little bit complicated how internal politics works. But generally what happens is the party will allow rebellions to take place. Generally, not always, but generally they will allow them to take place if they're convinced that the government can get their legislation through Parliament. So if the Conservative Party know that, look, Labour and the SNP will vote for this act, then we'll allow Steve Baker and the other lunatics within the party to have their fun. But if there's a risk that something will not get through Parliament, then they will convince or whip people like Steve Baker to support it. Steve Baker is a career politician. He probably wants to become a minister or a prime minister even sometime in the future. So he understands that he has to present himself as some sort of savior of society, defender of freedom. Yes, a defender of freedom. But he has to present himself as some sort of, contrarian or some sort of rebel, someone who's rebelling against the party itself. But in reality, he's not. The party, he agrees with the party most of the time, and he'll be permitted to vote against the party when the party know that there is no real threat.
It's obviously a very uncomfortable position for some of us to be in when it's our own party, and that's why we're trying to do it in a civilised way, asking reasonable questions. But the government will get its way, and at this stage I wouldn't like to say how big any rebellion will be. Of course, the plan out of these restrictions is a path to freedom. Unfortunately, many of us believe, that it squanders the advantages of our great vaccination programme. So it's difficult to see how very many people will want to vote against a path to freedom, but we'll need to look at exactly the detail. But the Coronavirus Act itself, I am expecting to vote squarely against. I think it's excessive and disproportionate, and the government itself now isn't using its powers. And where the police gain powers in the Act, as I've said, it's a 100% unlawful prosecution rate. So I think the Corona
Notice he's attacking the police, not the government. Once again, he will not attack the party. He will not attack Boris Johnson, and he will not attack the government. He's attacking the police here. He's attacked Labour. Like the police are following the law. The police do what they're told. He's a career politician. He understands that, as I've said, that he can create a place within the party for him to thrive, to develop his career. This is not about freedom. This is not about taking back control of personal freedoms or anything like that. This is not about fighting authoritarianism. Because if it was, then why the hell did he vote to take away people's freedoms? If Steve Baker had voted against this, then I would have been convinced. But I'm not convinced because he's a charlatan and he's a hypocrite.
Coronavirus Act should now go. That would not put the furlough scheme at risk. We've double-checked that and had it confirmed by the House of Commons Library. So obviously there's a lot to look at this week, but the government really does need to start taking advantage of their own great success on the vaccination programme.
Once again, no criticism of the government. So he's criticising the act, saying, it's going too far. But he's not criticising the people who presented it. He's not criticising Boris Johnson, the Conservative Party, or the government. But he decided instead to take some swipes at the opposition, who have no power. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?